Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Ola here. Welcome back. Coming to you live from my Empire Pro Studios. All right. So just know this, right? Most marriages do not collapse because couples stop talking. That's not what happens. Let's be. Can we just be? Can we call a spade a spade? Is that okay? Right? It's not because couples stop talking. That's not why. Okay? That's not why these marriages are failing left and right, guys. That's not why. Okay? Most marriages collapse because every conversation eventually becomes the same fight. Yes, we not too long ago we spoke about the same fight, but I got some messages and we need to get a little bit further into this topic, right? So they have the same fight, but yes, on the surface, it looks like different topic, right? Because they're probably different topics. But when you really look at it, it's the same pattern, right? Same resentment, right? Same ending, right? Not happy ending, by the way. Same ending. So yeah, it's again same fight, right? When you look at it, it's the same pattern, right? When you look at it, same ending, right? So eventually, after a while, it becomes your experience becomes a broken record. Yes, different topics, different yet all different topics, and we're going to dive into that today. Different topics. Why does this keep happening, guys? Why does this keep happening? Hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn up your notifications, right? The issue is not communication. The average person, when you speak to them, when they want to talk about what is the secret to successful marriage, coming from somebody who have been doing it for 19, about going on 20 years, I'm telling you right now, the issue is not communication. Okay, the issue is more so the cycle underneath the communication. People don't have trouble because they stop talking. Okay, it's not why. In fact, oftentimes, most people, they end up talking way too much. So the issue is not because people stop talking. It's not because they talk too much. In fact, talking is going to be the reality. These are the givens. These are things that will happen anyway, right? It's not that. Most marriages are failing because they're having the same fight over and over and over. And all of this is happening in the midst of what they consider to be communication. This is what they understand to be communication. It's the same pattern, same ending, same, different results. Sorry, different topics, right? Same ending, same pattern, same resentment that they go over and over again. All of this is what I call the cycle beneath the communication. All right. So again, thank you for being here. Hit the like button, share, subscribe. We're gonna dive into this together. All right, we're gonna dive into this together. Always do that when you get here. Always do that when you get here. And before we dive into today's breakdown, if your marriage is actively in a crisis state right now and you cannot afford to wait for these daily streams to figure out the piece by piece, the block by block, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Okay, getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Right now, book a one-on-one discovery session with me so we can map out your exact scenario privately. All right, welcome back. Now let's dive in a little bit deeper into this. Everything you have to complain about when it comes to marriage, yes, including DV, abuse, infidelity, money matters, irreconcilable differences, loss of attraction, low levels of attraction. All of it is, if you start to trace them, you will find what we're just talking about right now. You will find it there. Okay. So imagine this, right? You as a wife, you ask, can we talk? That's all you said. Okay. You ask, can we talk? What's going on, Luki Suzuki? You ask, can we talk? Immediately, his stomach tightens. You can't touch it, but you can feel it. You just know it, like something, the energy shifted, right? But you feel like, hey, we have to talk. We have to have hard conversations. Like, well, how we're going to be in a marriage and we can't talk, right? So after all, you are a self-proclaimed, call a spade a spade. You're going to call it out for what it is. It is what it is in your life. So you have to talk about it, right? Not because it's afraid of talking, by the way, right? It's because both of you already know how this movie is going to end, because you've seen it one too many times. All right, you say one thing, he hears another. He defends himself. You feel dismissed. He feels attacked. And then the voices get louder and louder and louder and louder, right? It gets louder and louder and louder. And eventually, doors closed. Doors slammed in somebody's face. Silence returns. And you really never got anywhere with that conversation. That's what many people are dealing with in what they call marriage. 2 days later, you're having the same exact fight again. The same movie is playing all over again. Different words, but the same emotions flying across the room. Same fight. All right. And that's what we're going to break down today. All right. Most couples, again, they're not fighting about the issue. Okay. They're fighting about the meaning behind the issue. Let me put that here so we can, okay. It's not the issue, yes, they are going to claim is the issue. They're going to claim is the issue, but it's not, okay. What they're fighting about is the meaning behind the issue. It's really their interpretation of how you are expressing yourself to each other. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind interpretation. People, their emotions, their life experiences will decide, it's not the issues. So, but that's what people are saying, right? So it makes it look like, okay, we can't get the what, but have you taken the time? So now this is the point where people will say, are you asking me to read minds? Huh? You asking me to read minds right now? No, I'm not asking you to read minds, okay? I'm asking you for actually a better skill set. But we're going to get into that. My wife and I, Lola and I, we have our personal stories. You can, so 175 pages right here. You can get it at getmymarriageback.com. And our story fits right into this. I'm not some holier than thou person that, like, I'm probably worse than many people personally, but eventually I had to do something about myself, and she had to do something about herself, right? It fits perfectly into our story, as a matter of fact, this thing that we're about to talk about today. Earlier on in our marriage, she would raise an issue, right? And all I heard was criticism. That's what I would hear. But I've also been this guy. Like, I try to see ahead of things and trying to fix issues and stuff like that. I would hear criticism. So if you hear criticism and you're with a wife and you're trying to fix it, not necessarily criticize her, what do you tend to do? You tend to correct, maybe teach her how to talk, right? How does that? Last time somebody tried to teach you how to talk, how did that How did that work out? Right? Anyway, I would defend myself because whatever she's saying feels like an attack. And the more I did that, the more she felt unheard. I did not find out until years later, right? Until we started to unpack, which again, all of it is in this book, right? And of course, the more she pushed, the more I withdrew. And the way I withdrew is not good. It's a very silent type of withdrawal. I'm still present. I'm taking care of my business as a man, you know. But it wasn't like there was no time I sat down somewhere else and I decided like I would hurt my wife, right? That's not how it worked. Now it felt she was doing that to me, right? But my understanding today, as is different. And it's not to say there's no bad people out there. It's not to say that there's no people married to bad persons out there, right? If that's the case, which I do think, my experience dealing with so many clients over the last 8 years now, I've seen a pattern, okay? I've seen a pattern. And I want to share some of those patterns with you, all right? The problem was the pattern. The problem was not the topic that made me feel attacked or that she felt was the point of contention, right? And that's what we've learned over a period of time, all right? That's what we've learned over a period of time, guys. It's the culprit in all of this is the patterns. And that's what you need to learn. You know, if you learn the patterns, you can, maybe we can call it the cycles, right? If you learn them, you can break them. If you can identify the patterns, the cycle that you keep repeating, then you can break them. Because when we call it a cycle, you are part of it, right? And you are helping the cycle continue in a certain direction. And all you have to do, let's simplify it. I know it's not simple. I know it's not easy. It's actually simple. All you have to do is break the cycle. All you have to do is stop feeding the cycle, right? The first chapter in the book is literally called Stop the Bleeding. I don't know why that keeps coming up, right? All you have to do is stop feeding the cycle, and then the cycle stops, right? Why your marriage conversations turn into fights every time? It's a cycle. It's a pattern, clearly, right? All you have to do is stop. Now, stopping that cycle is easier said than done because you do have some real things. Those things are called topics, right? I said these are not the problems, right? But those things are real life issues. Those are real life issues that needs to be addressed. Because I'm not just going to sit here and tell you you're lying and there was no real issues. There were real issues, but the issues were not the issues. It was the meaning behind the issues. Right? So really what you need to do is break the cycle. But how do you break the cycle? How do you break the cycle? I'm going to share some universal roadmap to doing that here today, but just know that everybody's stories are different, right? One of my clients, right, she ran into a ditch, right? She ran into a ditch, right? She's the one who was carrying the babies all the time, right? These are also kids with special needs, right? And you can think about, I don't know if you can connect the dots, right? When we say kids have special needs, let me break that down for you, right? Disabled kids, right? Kids, special needs, they need special attention, right? Meaning it's a lot more work, right? And she talked about how unsupported she feels, right? She didn't feel supported, right? And this is not a bad, and in that same breath, she kept trying to make excuses for him, which tells me that he's not a bad person either, right? So who's bad? What's creating the bad, right? So, of course, that's a question. That's a big question that keeps coming to the surface because in the same breath, she's defending him, right? And in the same breath, she's she's complaining about not being supported, feeling lonely, right? Right? And then she's also complaining about something that a lot of women in traditional settings, if you come from a family oriented culture, right, you would have to deal with family interferences, and that's what she had to deal with on top of all that. Right? So every time she brought this up, all he hears is criticism. Like, you're failing. Yeah, she's just trying to make a point here. She's just trying to say, hey, I'm struggling here, right? I'm struggling. I need help, right? But all he hears is, you're failing. And that's the last thing a man wants to hear, because if he's hearing that in his head, even though you didn't say that, right, he's going to respond negatively. And he might even say, as a mature person, I shouldn't have to make you happy. But then he, as a mature person, he's hearing something else in his head, even though you are saying something else. Welcome to the real world. That's called marriage, guys. That's called marriage. Okay? He feels like he's failing. So, ideally, if you feel like you're failing, you're supposed to just stop failing, right? Find out why you're failing and let's fix it. No, but if he feels like he's feeling like he's not your super duper man. And then he responds negatively, because he's also referencing that across to all the work that he does. And then he might feel unappreciated. And none of this has to do with what you're talking about, the topic. But every time you attempt to communicate with him, he feels like he's failing. So he looks at that, he matches that across to all the effort that he puts in, but it doesn't match. So what? He rebels. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with my wife and I have to deal with this kind of cases, right? So with that being said, I want to share the conversation collapse loop with you. I shared something similar rather with you earlier on, but let's go over this again in a different way to help facilitate some better understanding. Okay, so you have a concern. Okay, you have a concern. We're gonna call this the conversation collapse loop. The conversation collapse loop. Okay, let's call this the conversation collapse loop. All right, so remember, all of this is the cycles, right? The cycles. All right, so usually we're gonna put this here. I'm gonna show you what we're dealing with here, right? It starts as a concern, right? You expressed a concern. Men, all you're trying to do is correct her, right? What is wrong with correcting your wife, right? This is all you're trying to do, right? And what do we have? That's all you're trying to do, just correct. And now it has become, for some reason, we're going to end this right here, right? It ends in the same fight. What is everything happening behind the scenes that keeps leading to the same fight? That's what I want us to cover, right? How do we get from just expressing a simple concern, something that's going to help both me and you, our family, our children? How do we keep ending in the same fight over and over and over and over and again, right? So when you express your concern, what has been your personal experiences? You can fill in the gap here, right? Somehow, some way, people travel from, right, from here to here. How does that happen? Because it does, like, people just, you know how people will say, hey, how do you go to like straight to 100 suddenly? Usually it's not a straight to 100 thing. Trust me, it's not. It might feel that way because, again, you know how the story is going to end. You're already anticipating it. Sometimes you call it anxiety. All you said is like, can we talk? That's all you said. That's all you said, guys. Can we talk? Can we talk for the minutes? That song make you feel so good, but whenever you heard that from your wife or your husband, your heart just keeps, right? Concerns are going to happen inevitably in a long-term relationship, especially marriages, right? So concern leads to a complaint. Let's just put that on the board real quick. A complaint. Yeah. Complaint. Right? Complaint, your intention is you're expressing a concern. But what the other person is hearing, nagging. They're hearing that you're nagging, right? And, you know, they're hearing nagging. Obviously, they didn't start hearing nagging on day one. It's after like day 8, day 10, or, you know, it's happening a few times. So it starts to sounding wah, 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 like noise to them. They don't decide this. This is just what they hear, right? Like, what's going on? That's what they hear. So naturally, when they hear complaint, it feels like an attack. Remember what I just said, right? He hears he's failing, right? So he's arguing with his destiny. It's like, I'm not failing. I put in so much work into this, right? Some people are just deadbeat. Most of you are not necessarily married to a deadbeat. That's why you're trying to fix the marriage, okay? So he hears this, is trying to correlate it. It's not correlating. So what does he do? He gets defensive, guys. These are the things that happen underneath, right? So of course, a lot of things are going to get lost in translation. He gets defensive. No, he gets defensive. We're not yet at the same fight yet. He gets defensive. That's what happens behind the scenes. Yeah? He gets defensive, guys. So what happens after he gets defensive? He gets defensive. Eventually, both of you are going to end up in a state of frustration. Why? Because you can't get your point across. He doesn't agree with whatever it is you're trying to say, right? So you both feel frustrated, right? Let's call that frustrated X2, right? Let's call it frustrated X2. Frustrated X2. Multiply by 2. Frustrated X2. This is the part where you can't see eye to eye. It's not making sense to you. What is the big deal in what you said? You said nothing crazy. Like you didn't say anything, right? And so that tussle back and forth, right? You know, somebody's going to shut down. Somebody is not even into all this. So when you're doing that, it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, like this. Yeah? It gets louder. Frustration. Yeah? Frustration, guys. So let's put louder here. Let's put louder right here on the board. Yeah. It gets louder. Ladies and gentlemen, what about the shutdown? Right? Remember what I was just saying. Somebody's going to shut down. There's at least usually one of those partners, one of the couple, either the husband or the wife. There's usually somebody with that personality. It's just too much for them. They have to take a break. right? Or it's too much. They've actually tried to escape, right? But anyway, yes, they do shut down eventually. Shut down. It's usually one person who shuts down. So if somebody shuts down, right, that's the other person is going to feel like they're being dismissive, right? Well, eventually that all leads to resentment, right? But I'm going to put dismissed. I'm going to put dismissed in front of this. Yeah. So one person is going to feel dismissed, which is not good. That's going to feel like emotional. That's going to feel emotionally draining on their part, right? There's one more thing I want to add here. There's one more thing I want to add here, right? There's one more thing I want to add here, right here, before it finally leads into, we can call it the same fight. I'm going to add something right here. I'm going to add something right here, right? Before I add what I want to add there, let me just say this to you, right? You see, what I'm teaching you right now is a universal roadmap. Every marriage has its own unique hidden landmines. Please know this, know peace, okay? You're gonna have your own shortcomings, specific, unique to your own story. Your own curveball. Life is gonna throw your own curveball at you, right? And if you want me to look directly at your specific situation, your own relationship blocks, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, you want to go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. You're realizing probably for the first time that it's not the communication, it's all the meanings beneath the communication, the patterns, right? The thing that is how they keep interpreting whenever you have a point of concern. It's how they keep receiving you, so it keeps ending in the same fight over. The issue is identifying which pattern is destroying your marriage, okay? And that's exactly what we do in the discovery session. Just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. All right. So let's keep it moving. So what is it that I want to add into that, right? I want to add resentment. A lot of marriages are suffering from seeds of resentment sown over a period of time, guys. And it's going to take a lot of patience to unpack every story inside resentment. People will put together family meetings trying to sort through resentment. And it usually gets worse because somebody gets frustrated in the middle of all those stories being told. And if somebody doesn't speak, if they don't get to talk about what is really bothering them, it stays there and it continues to eat up the marriage. It will continue to eat up the marriage, and if you don't have the patience to navigate or allow a person to speak their mind, what is really bothering them, if you don't have the patience for that, it's going to stay there as resentment, and that resentment it doesn't leave in that marriage for free. It's going to collect serious taxes on that marriage. And a lot of people are dealing with that as we speak. They've never been allowed to express their frustration, right? Because every time they attempt to express it, they end up getting stuck. They end up getting stuck in the conversation collapse loop. And that's what a lot of people have to deal with, guys. And the bottom line is different topic, same pattern. Different topic, same pattern. Different topic, same pattern, guys. That's what you need to navigate through. And it's simple stuff, but it's not easy when we start to really dive into your story. But nonetheless, it's necessary work. And when you do this work, it's highly rewarding. Highly rewarding. If you can find your way, get the support system you need to do the necessary work, it's highly rewarding. Okay? So, unfortunately, most people think if I explain it better, they will understand, because they still stuck on, they're trying to explain the topic, right? But the reality is that when people feel attacked, even though that's not your intention, we talked about good intention. There's another episode where we talk about good intentions. Go watch it, okay? Even though that's not your intentions, right? They feel attacked, and when they feel attacked, they stop listening, guys. They stop listening. You know, there's something we call the relationship poison, right? It's part of our framework that we teach you here. And a lot of people, they call it accountability, but really, when you start to look through it, right? When you really start to look through it, is really blame. Yeah, it's blame. Blame is a poison. It's a relationship poison. All right. But how do you know the difference between blame and accountability? Well, accountability has to start with self. Okay? Accountability has to start with self, guys. You can't hold accountable without reflecting, and it needs to start with self. If you own it, it will be received as accountability, because it will be glaringly clear that it started with self. But when it's just pointing fingers, it's called blame, and blame is poison. Okay? And most people, when they say accountability, they are, again, it's not something that you can pull out dictionary meanings and stuff like that. It needs to be assessed for what is the value, not just moral values, but does the person you're trying to hold accountable see value? Do they feel value? If they don't feel value, what do most people do? They turn around and still continue to blame. It's because they don't want to be held accountable. They just want to be bad and not be held accountable. Yeah. I think we should also assess your communication skills. We should also assess if you have game. If you don't have game, it's okay. It's like you're like everybody else. All of us started off that way, by the way. Right? So blame versus accountability. Blame is poisonous, right? What separates the two is because accountability usually starts as, it reflects on self, right? So it's not hard to see if you're actually holding yourself accountable, and it's not the words. It's something we can get into a little bit deeper with time. Okay. Defense, it kills curiosity. Once they get defensive, it goes left. Blame creates defense, right? If you blame a person, naturally they get defensive. You might say, but some people just don't like to be held accountable. Okay, you're still circling back to blame, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to communicate, you do have some responsibility in communication, right? Blame creates defense. Defense creates curiosity. No, it doesn't. It kills curiosity. Okay, curiosity is supposed to help with understanding. Now they want to understand you, but they're not even open to that anymore, because they're stuck in the defense loop, right? But if you can get them to a place of understanding, that naturally creates connection, which is ultimately what you're looking for. If you have connection, they are much more open to wanting to receive whatever you have to say. Even when you blame mistakenly because you're trying to fix yourself, they're able to give you some grace because there's connection, right? But what we find is that people continue to like dig in deeper. They pull out dictionary meanings and they start to justify the BS, the bullshit. They don't know any better. They don't know any better, guys. All right. So why? Because somehow they know better than the other person. Right? You know better than the other person. What could you have done wrong? What could you have done much more correctly? There's nothing else. They were wrong, and wrong is wrong. And let's just call a wrong a wrong. If we can't call a wrong, what the hell are we doing then? Right? These are the questions that people ask. Self, if you can put this in there somewhere, again, we can actually have the true meaning of accountability. Because you need to lead with it. If you can lead with it, right, and that's not accountability. That's you just being a toxic. You're being a judge, and that's in your own relationship, in your own romantic relationship. Nobody juju. It's not going to work. I'm just being honest with you. It's not going to work. Anyway, I want to show you what I call the pride loop. Remember what I was just saying. Somehow you know better than them. So, hey, you're better than them. Okay, you don't say it exactly like that, right? You don't say it like that. And it might not be you, it might be your partner, right? But you need to understand the pride loop. Okay? What does it start with? You usually start with righteousness. You're right? You know what you're saying. You know that you are right. In fact, all the evidences around you justifies it. You put out dictionary meaning. You point out you have your evidence. We talked about evidence. Go and watch that video as well, right? You're right. So if you're right, what else is there to discuss? If you're right, after all, right? What is there to discuss if you're already right? All you have to do is hold them accountable, right?
You're right.
Yeah, you're right. But anyway, you're right leads to what? We're talking about the pride loop, right? If you're right and you know that you are pride, naturally you want to prove, because you're obsessed with being right. You want to prove it. Evidence. Go and watch the full episode on evidence, the evidence trap, right? What happens after you prove? Like, you would hope that after you prove, they would just agree with you, right? They're supposed to just, if you show the evidence, they're just supposed to be right. You forgot that this is not the court of law, right? It's either you're dealing with the court of romance, right? Meaning emotions, no be your mate, right? What they naturally do is they defend. Even in the court, they will still defend. How much more in a romantic relationship? They defend. What happens after that, guys? You want to try? Just think about it. What happens after they defend? Defend means they get defensive. That's what I'm saying. Okay? What does that look like when somebody starts to get defensive, right? Remember, all of this started with you're right. You know what you're trying to say. You have the evidence. This is your story. We can't tell you how to tell your story. We can't pinch a baby and not tell a baby how not to cry. All of this is what people that lack game would say. And by the way, in all of that, they are right. Okay?
You're right.
What that looks like in real life is arguments. They argue, right? Because again, your expectations are off. You think you're just going to prove, and then suddenly they're just going to accept because you have evidence. You have the evidence, right? Yeah, right. Nope, it doesn't pan out that way. After they argue, what happens, guys? What happens? Yeah. You might actually win. Actually, sometimes you actually win the arguments, right? So let's go with the best case scenario, right? For this, you win the argument, right? What happens after you win the argument, guys? In real life, let's talk about how attraction actually works in a marriage. You win the argument. Finally, you should be happy, right? Supposed to be happy. I'm sorry, guys. This is bad. This is not a good thing. Okay? How do I know it's not a good thing? I'll show you. I'll show you how I know. Right? Because when you win, if you do this enough time, there will be a disconnect. Right? That's not what you want in your marriage. Right? It's disconnect. Why? Because they still don't want to be called to order. What is wrong with correction? I know. Nonetheless, this is the result you are creating. Because remember, you are still right.
Well, you're right.
You're still right. You're still right, guys. All right. Yeah. But so this is what people do, right? This is what happens. This is why a lot of marriages with good people in it, people that are right, people that just have good, they have good intentions. They're just trying to express a point of concern. It's not really, all of this shouldn't be a big deal, right? What usually happens is that they win the argument, right? They win the argument, right? But then they lose the marriage. Somebody said, well, it's just modern people. No, it's always this is human nature. It's always been this way. It might present a little bit slightly different because of social media, because everybody has a microphone and everybody have opinions these days, right? It might present this way, but I'm telling you right now, okay, it's always been this way. It's just back then they can send you back to your father's house if you're a woman. Right? They don't have to file a divorce, so nobody's keeping track of what the numbers actually say. So what do you do? That's a good question. What do you do if you actually still have to express your concern? What is wrong with adults? Why can't they just be matured? That's a fantastic question. Yes. But first we need to first of all address the mismanaged pride causing the issue. This is mismanaged pride, because remember, pride, as you should have a sense of pride as a human being, right? But if it's mismanaged, it destroys everything in its path. Everything. It destroys, never mind the intentions. Never mind that you actually have a real point of contention. Something that has to be addressed, right? Mismanaged pride destroys everything in its path, guys. So it needs to be managed. How do you manage that with respect to an actual relationship? There's an actual real point of contention. There are real issues that still needs to be discussed, right? We're talking about communication to a large extent, right? All of that, right? But the problem is that every time, let me just say this to you real quick, right? Every time you prioritize being right over being understood, those are two different things, guys. It's about being right versus being understood. This is again, I'm giving you right now the secret. I'm giving you the game, guys. Being right versus, if you prioritize being right over being understood, being understood requires a little bit more effort. Not necessarily effort, it's more like skill set. It involves a little bit more of a skill set on your part, right? Because once you learn how to do this, it becomes second nature, right? You get understood, you can still be right, because I think you're always going to be right. I don't know why you put so much energy in being right. If you prioritize being right over being understood, you will continue to create a disconnect. in your marriage. Being right is a default because you see what you see, and you're right when you say we can invalidate your story. So you shouldn't need so much. This is the part that you need to apply effort in. This guy is the culprit. This is what you need to master. This is the game that you need to master, guys. Being understood. Just because you're talking doesn't mean you have the skills to create understanding, guys. Okay? Every time you prioritize being right over being understood, you move one step closer to a disconnect. I hope that's making sense, guys. I hope that's making sense. All right, so before we wrap up, let me leave you with this. If during today's lesson you found yourself thinking, he's describing my marriage, don't go back to guessing. Okay, every marriage is different. Like I told you, this is a universal roadmap that's applicable to everyone, but you have some uniqueness in your own story. That's your stuff, right? And every relationship has their own history, personalities, blind spots, and that's why I offer private one-on-one discovery session. Okay, and what I do is basically I spend 1 hour with you. And then we look at your specific situation, identify what's happening in your relationship, and then help you gain clarity on what the next best step is. We'll give you a plan. We get you a custom plan to get you out of the terrible conversation collapse loop. The loop doesn't just keep happening and then you can normalize it and stay there forever and just no, that's not how it works. Okay, what usually happens in the loop is that it will find its way into divorce. Okay, something has to give. Okay, something has to give eventually. See, let me put that right here. We don't like to use the D word, but hey, it's the reality, unfortunately, for so many people. All right, so and divorce doesn't just cost you money. Okay, most people get stuck on the money. Just prenup, nonsense. Prenup will protect your money. That's about it. But your most precious crown jewel in all of this is not just money, because you can get money back. You can get time back. And if your heart is broken, the rest of your life and the rest of any relationships you create will continue to suffer from that. Okay, so just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. The link is also pinned into the description box below. Being understood is the goal. Being understood, right? Why your marriage conversations turn into fights every time. It's wild. It's wild. I hope we're making sense, guys. If any of this is making sense to you, please make sure you hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn up your notifications so you are notified when we go live. Okay, now what I want to share with you is with respect to your unique story. So application might be slightly different. All right, so what happens if you, instead of having a conversation collapse loop, what if you have a connection conversation loop, guys? What would that look like? Yeah, what would the connection conversation loop look like? Let's call it the connection conversation loop, because like you said, you're right. We actually have to address this. We can't just let it slide, right? This is something that actually has to, there are issues. Life will create issues and they need to be addressed. Well, like I said, don't try to be playing I'm an adult and the other person is a child. that's going to backfire, right? That will usually backfire. What you need to do is have an understanding of everything, the pattern that's happening with your marriage behind the scenes. That's what you need to pay attention to. And that's very difficult to do when you actually have real life issues that you really want to talk about. It's easier said than done. So I understand what it might feel like, but once you practice, if you know the stuff and you practice it in due time, you will notice a pattern. It becomes second nature, and then it seems like, oh, they happily ever after, and they seem to figure each other out. Okay, so let's say real life triggers, right? Something happens. There's a trigger. Okay, there's a trigger. He did something. Okay, so there's a concern, right? There's a concern, right? Instead of jumping into straight complaint, what if? Just what if? Right? Again, it's just a suggestion. I just thinking all the way through, right? But actually, before I get into the what if, this is where we're going to. Okay. Ultimately, what we're going to is that there's a trigger, right? But we want to get to a place of, let's call this repair. Let's put that right down here, and we're gonna call it repair. Okay, because something happened, and things are going to happen, right? And sometimes they're negative. If I call it trigger, it's probably negative, right? We want to get to a place of repair because life happens, right? But how do you get from trigger to repair and not get from trigger to a disconnect and potentially divorce? And that's what the conversation loop is about. Okay, so what if you don't just jump into conclusion that you know that you're right, that you know you're right? What if you leave a small room of possibility that you could be wrong? Okay, you're not wrong, because I still think you're right. I think you're always right because you see what you see.
You're right.
The issue is that there's another person involved, a whole human being. They have a different point of view. So why not just pause? What is wrong with just a pause? Just a quick little nice pause. What is wrong with that? I'll tell you what is wrong with that for most people. It's the anxiety. It's the anxiety. And that could mean so many things. So it's almost like I said nothing, right? But okay, if you pause, right, what would happen? We're not just gonna we're not gonna be waiting forever, just for a little while. When I say pause, like it's a pause. It's not a stop. It's a pause. Like just drink water. Sometimes go take a cold shower. Okay, maybe warm. I like warm showers better. Like heaven is not going to fall out of the skies because I just felt triggered. Right? My wife said something, I felt triggered. I felt like jinjinji inside of me, and it's negative. It's not a good feeling, right? All I did is I paused, right? I exercised a little bit of what we call patience. Okay, well, because I paused, I'm able to listen, right? I'm able to listen, to actually observe what is going on. Going on with what? Not with her necessarily, with me. Why do I feel the way that I feel? That's the first step in emotional intelligence, guys. Why do I feel the way that I feel outside of the external influences? Because the trigger is external influence, right? But why did that make me feel the way that I feel? That's all part of listening. But of course, also, listen, like actually you listen. Like listen, you got triggered. Listen, ask, what do you mean? What are you trying to tell me now? Right? What does that mean? Can you tell me more about that? Yeah. It sounds strange to so many people because what they do is like, you said what you said. I heard what you said. I heard what you said. Well, listen, not just listen. I know this is not your corporate office and this is supposed to be your husband. Why do I have to jump through all these hoops? It's not a lot. It's just something to consider, right? If you get just 7 out of 10 of what I'm sharing with you, if you get this right, that's all you need. But if you're just moving blindly through life anyway, you listen. After you listen, what happens? If you listen, don't just listen, validate, confirm that that's what you heard. Again, don't assume what you heard is what you heard. Remember that guy, right? He heard, what he heard is that he's failing. That's not what she said, right? Validate. They train you this at your job. Because of your next week paycheck, you obey it. But somehow, the most expensive part of your life, you think you can just skip through life and not end up in divorce. You will end up in divorce if you don't do something about your skills, particularly communication skills. Our parents, 9 out of 10 times, they didn't teach us this. In fact, what they taught us is to be silent when they're talking. If you came from any kind of traditional family setting, be silent when adults, elders are talking, right? Anyway, after you validate, no, chill. We're going to chill. We're going to still remember. We already concluded that heaven is not going to fall out of the skies because you felt triggered. You already know that something else is happening behind the scenes of you first before it can be translated to be a trigger. Something happened in you. There's a meaning you attach to what happened to the event before you can consider it a trigger, right? So you still need to clarify, guys. Let's put clarify there. Why are we taking so long before we get to the repair? I know, because anything worthwhile in life requires work, and that's a good thing. Work is a beautiful part of life. Clarify. Don't just jump into conclusion, guys. Okay? You clarify. Okay, after you clarify, remember I was saying part of emotional intelligence is to reflect and say, hey, why do I feel the way I feel? Right? That's the first step in emotional intelligence, right? Because number one, you've acknowledged that you feel, right? That's already a beautiful place to start from. All of this just because you want to talk. Why can't we just call a spade a spade? Go and check out those who are those who are calling a spade a spade. Go and check very, very well. Okay? So after this, after you clarify what happens, what do I want you to do? Guys, I want you to own your part. Own your part. Ownership. You want your life to go a certain direction, guess what you have to do? You have to own. Ownership is going to be a radical ownership, is going to be a major part of that. Right? What do most people do? They point fingers at anything but self. Right? And they call it, they're just telling the truth. Is it the truth? Yes, it's the truth. They are right.
You're right.
Okay, this is the part that you're probably in a hurry to get into, but let me just go ahead and share with you, because patience does pay off. Okay. After you own your part, right? After you own your part, it is now okay to actually make what I call a request, but it to be coming from a very healthy place. You're cool, calm, collected. Remember, there was an actual concern before, right? There was a real thing that happened. We're not just going to discard or pretend that that thing doesn't exist, right? Whatever it is, it happened, and it needed to be expressed, communicated, right? Then you can make a request, guys. But that request will be better received because you are wholesome. You are within your place of confidence. you're communicating that a certain way, they can feel your energy that you're not in a needy place right now. It's because neediness is not attractive. Let's be honest. Neediness is just annoying. Okay, you're coming from a place of a request, and then that easily translates to repair. I enjoy that way too much. Most spouses want correction. What their partner needs is connection. Okay, most spouses, what they do is, what you probably want is correction. Even when you call a therapist, a counselor on your partner, you want them to help you correct them. But really, what you should be striving for is connection. What your partner needs is connection. And that's not going to happen without the issues being addressed, but it has to be addressed a certain way. Okay? Right? And friendship will die when every conversation feels dangerous. Friendship grows when every conversation feels safe, guys. Conversation that leads to fight, you are talking about, is threats. It feels like a threat, right? Whenever somebody translates or interprets what you have to say as they don't matter, right, they're not going to feel close to you, right? So they're going to get defensive, right? In effort to create certainty or security for themselves, they're going to avoid that conversation every single time. Okay, so your marriage doesn't need better arguments. Some people out there are teaching you just need to learn how to argue better, but they still end up in the same ditch. Okay, your marriage needs safer conversation. If that's what you mean by argument, then I'm all for it, because again, we can throw words around all day. Sometimes we get stuck in these semantic loops, but maybe that's something we should cover. Semantic loops. How's that? All right. So if every conversation in your marriage eventually turns into the same fight, you're not dealing with a communication problem. You're dealing with a cycle, a bad cycle, and cycles don't break themselves. You have to break the cycle. You don't have to wait for the other person to break the cycle, guys. You don't have to wait for them to break the cycle. If today's lesson helped you, I'd appreciate if you like this video, subscribe, share it with someone who needs it. And just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery if you're looking for me to help you personally with your situation. This is what I just shared with you, the conversation collapse loop, and this is what you're trying to avoid. It starts with a genuine concern, but it generally, for the most part, 90 out of 100 times leads to complaint, defensiveness, frustration, louder delivery, shutdown, resentment, same fight over and over again. This is what you're trying to avoid, guys. This right here is what you're trying to avoid. All right. And if you can figure it out, absolutely, my pleasure. Okay. If you need my support to help you through that, just go through and book a discovery session at getmymarriageback.com/discovery. And the future is super bright. We'll see you tomorrow.
Are you fighting to save a marriage or a relationship, or simply avoiding to end up in a broken or toxic one?
We've been there, and you're in the right place. You see, inside this book, right, you will find and you will discover the secret to save a broken marriage, and you will learn how to build and attract the marriage of your dream.